Mr. Jordan from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. DeJoy, do you have any protesters at your house last night?
Not last night.
President Biden called for you to resign, Mr. DeJoy?
No, the president has not called for me to resign.
Any member of your board called for you to resign?
No, sir.
None of the Republicans on the board haven't called, any of the Democrats called for it?
We have, it's hard to tell in our board meetings because we all very much act in a bipartisan manner focused on postal issues. But there are two gentlemen that, the chair identified that he's a registered Democrat, and I think there's another gentleman on the board.
Mr. Bloom's a Democrat, right? He
Yeah,
supports
he's a
you.
Democrat. Yep.
Is the chair of this committee, has she called for you to resign this Congress?
She has not.
She called for you to be suspended last Congress, but I don't think she's called for you to resign this Congress, has she?
We've had good conversations on
Yeah.
a variety
Now, I
of
know where Mr. Connolly's at and some of the Democrats, but I mean, last time you were here, you had protesters banging on pots and pans outside your house. You had 90-some people calling for you to resign. You were the worst guy on the planet last time you were here. I just want to know what's changed.
maybe, that's not for me to answer.
I mean, they were so ticked last time, Mr. DeJoy. They passed a bill. They called us in on a Saturday in August to pass a bill, and then they had a hearing on the bill they passed 2 days later. You remember that?
Sir, it was an unfortunate set of circumstances for me, for my family, for the postal employees, for the postal board. None of it was based in any type of fact. It was sensationalization. But we're through. I'm through that. The board's through that. We're just trying to get our plan, get this legislation passed, and get on with the improvements we need to
They
make.
passed a bill on Saturday, August 22nd, a bill they know had no chance of becoming law, a bill that was not even taken up in the Senate. Then they had a hearing on the bill they already passed 2 days later. Normally, you do it the other way around. Normally, you actually have a committee get together, look at the legislation, debate it, discuss it, have witnesses, get expert testimony, all that stuff, and then you maybe pass it out of committee and go to the floor and do it. They called us in special to pass a bill on a Saturday and then had a hearing on Monday, and all that weekend they had protesters at your house disrupting your family and, frankly, your neighbors as well. And now you're telling me you got no one on the Board of Governors asking you to resign, no protesters at your house, the president hasn't asked you to resign, the chairwoman hasn't asked you to resign, and I want to know what's happened. What's different between February 24th, 2021 and August 24th, 2020? What happened in those 6 months? What could explain the Democrats' difference in attitude?
Mr. George, Congressman, I don't want to participate in.
What do you mean you don't want to participate? I'm asking you a question, a simple question.
I believe
Can you
everybody.
hazard a guess as what might have happened between August 24th, 2020,
I am
when they
hoping-
passed a bill and then had a hearing on it? What may have happened between August 24th, 2020 and February 24th, 2021? What could have happened in the interim there that would change the attitude of Democrats?
One of two things. Either everyone's anxious to hear our new strategic plan, or we had an election.
I'm
One
sure
of-
that's it. I'm sure that's it. Still waiting for an answer. I did this to you when you were here last time, Mr. DeJoy. I asked you, to comment on something. You wouldn't do it then either. What happened between August and February? What important event happened?
We had an election.
We had an election. It was all a charade. You not take my word for it. The Wall Street Journal called it a giant conspiracy theory. Called us back in. It was all part of the predicate for laying the groundwork for the mail-in balloting and all the chaos and confusion the Democrats wanted, and the laws that I think they passed in so many states, frankly, in an unconstitutional fashion. It was all about politics. It was all about the election. Agree with that, Mr. DeJoy?
It was a very sensitive time for the nation, and there was a lot of activity.
They accused you of things that they said you were restricting overtime. False. They told you, oh, you were taking the collection boxes, doing something that had never been done before, even though it had been done by every previous Postmaster General. 12,000 of them had been moved by the Obama administration Postmaster General, but oh, somehow you were the worst. Again, all under the guise of creating this crazy chaos that they wanted around the election relative to mail-in balloting, and you were the guy they used to launch it all, to start it all in the summer. when everyone was calling, saying all kinds of, you were the, like I said, they had you as the worst guy on the planet back then, and now everything, it seems to be so much better now.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And all the gaslighting that we just heard does not change facts. Mr. Diamondstein, please move the mic close to your mouth. Thank you. Am I making this up, as Mr. Jordan apparently would have you believe, that the President of the United States last summer, Donald J. Trump, publicly said voting by mail would lead to massive fraud? Did he say that, or am I imagining that, Mr. Diamondstein?
I don't think you're imagining it. What I recall him saying at one point is he was going to make sure that the Postal Service got no financial COVID emergency relief, because then they would be able to more effectively deliver ballots.
Thank you. But the point is, it was Donald Trump, the Republican nominee, who was planting the idea, aided and abetted by disruptive changes proposed by a new Postmaster General and a compliant Board of Governors, that actually eroded public confidence in the ability to vote by mail. That wasn't a Democratic narrative. That was a Republican narrative by the President of the United States and his enablers. And oh, by the way, inconvenient fact, Mr. Heiss would have you believe that it was partisans on this committee, and he quoted a number of Democrats, by the way, admitted Democrats. For the record, I'm an admitted Democrat and damn proud of it. I didn't vote to overturn an election, and I will not be lectured by people who did about partisanship. But facts are stubborn things. It wasn't the idea that it was complete fiction, that the changes proposed by in fact, implemented by Mr. Joy with a compliant board, led by now Chairman Mr. Bloom, who's admitted he went along with them. It was a federal judge who found it politically motivated, not a Democratic critic. I refer you to a Reuters story last September. U.S. District Judge Stanley Bastian in Yakima, Washington, upheld a challenge by 14 states and enjoined the Postmaster General to stop what he was doing, and said, the states have demonstrated that the defendants are involved, the defendants being Mr. DeJoy and company, they are involved in a politically motivated attack on the efficiency of the Postal Service. That's not some partisan Democrat. That's a federal judge. And that wasn't the only ruling that provided an injunction to stop the deliberate disruption of the Postal Service that was contributing to erosion of confidence in the ability of people to vote by mail. That wasn't a Democratic plot. And all of the gaslighting we're listening to here doesn't change the facts. Mr. Bloom, you've admitted that, in fact, you supported and do support the changes that Mr. DeJoy undertook that were widely criticized, not just by Democrats, but by actual American people who received the mail or didn't, by businesses, by stakeholders, by the media. That didn't just originate in this room. Somehow, people were bothered by it, because one of the most sacred institutions in America that still works during the pandemic, warts and all, was actually being threatened in the public mind by these changes, and that the reason was political. We didn't make that up. A federal judge confirmed it. Mr. Bloom, you agreed with those changes? You agreed to hire Mr. DeJoy because you found him qualified? You were, according to one of your colleagues, you were all tickled pink with the performance of the Postmaster General in the height of the controversy during a pandemic. Are you still tickled pink with his performance?
The board supports the Postmaster General.
Your colleagues said 100% of the board were tickled pink and had complete support. So was he speaking for you that you were tickled pink? Just want to get it in the record that you're
I'm
tickled pink.
generally not tickled, I'm generally not tickled pink by things, but as I said, the Board of Governors believes the Postmaster General, in very difficult circumstances, is doing a good job, and we've been involved with the development of a plan that we think will make the Postal Service much stronger.
I appreciate your
much better
candor.
over
I'm
time.
running out of time. Respectfully, I disagree, and I hope President Biden disagrees as well, and that we take action to replace the Board of Governors with people who care about the Postal Service and are going to be committed to their job of oversight and accountability. I yield back.
Madam Chair, point of order.
The gentleman's recognized for a point of order.
I just wanted to state for the record, Mr. Connolly pointed over about voting to object in the election. I've never, ranking member, I've never voted to object to a presidential election. But I will tell you who has, Nancy Pelosi in 2004. So I just wanted to state that for the record. I yield back.
The gentleman
Madam
yields back.
Chairwoman, if I may, I appreciate the distinguished gentleman's comment. I did not name anybody who voted to overturn the election. Certainly did not mean to include Mr. Comer if he didn't do it.
Madam Chair,
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grossman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to just in general thank you for getting out the